Have you ever wondered why some men, after a lifetime of relationships, choose to stay alone, even when they have the option for love? James Carter, a 70-year-old man, is living proof that sometimes the best decision is to walk away from love. But it's not out of bitterness, nor because he's lost hope. It's because he has learned something many never do: the true value of inner peace. After decades of emotional ups and downs, heartbreaks, and failed relationships, James discovered that peace isn't something you find in someone else. It's something you must cultivate within yourself. For James, love was no longer a promise of happiness. It had become a source of stress and heartache. As he looked back on his life, he realized that love, while beautiful, often came with hidden costs, emotional baggage, expectations, and the ever-present fear of disappointment. So he made a choice that many would see as sad or lonely, but for him, it was the wisest decision he could make. No more compromises, no more emotional games, just peace. James isn't the only one who feels this way. More and more older men are choosing solitude, not because they are afraid of being alone, but because they've learned the priceless value of being at peace with themselves. What if you could live the rest of your life free from the chaos of love, with only the calm and quiet of your own thoughts? Would you choose that too? James had seen it all: the ups, the downs, the false promises, and the broken vows. He had spent years chasing love, believing it would fill the empty spaces in his life, only to find that it often left him feeling more alone than before. He had married, built a family, and given everything to those he loved, but as time passed, he realized that love, as beautiful as it might seem, had its dark sides. It wasn't about the grand gestures or the fleeting moments of happiness anymore. It was about the constant adjustments, the sacrifices, the emotional toll that drained him more than it gave. At first, he thought it was just the nature of relationships, the compromise, the giving, the taking. But as the years piled up, he couldn't ignore the truth. The more he gave, the less he felt in return. The love that once seemed like a beautiful dream had turned into a series of unmet needs, unspoken expectations, and hurtful disappointments. Now, sitting in the quiet of his living room, James found solace in the simplicity of his dog, Max. The dog didn't demand anything of him. Max didn't care about his past, didn't ask for emotional labor or promises of forever. He just offered comfort, loyalty, and companionship. It was simple. It was real. And for the first time in a long while, James felt peace in his heart. The kind of peace he hadn't known he needed until he was alone. James had spent years questioning himself, wondering if love was truly worth it. He had given so much, and yet, what did he have to show for it? The scars from past relationships had been buried deep, but the weight of them remained heavy on his heart. He had experienced the excitement of new love, the intensity of early passion, but over time, those feelings faded into something far less fulfilling. The constant compromise, the emotional labor, the silent resentment, it all became too much to bear. As he thought back, he realized that love, at least the way he had known it, was a cycle of disappointment. People change, expectations shift, and feelings of connection often fade. James couldn't shake the feeling that no matter how hard he tried, he was always giving more than he received. The last time he had truly felt seen and appreciated was too long ago. Now, as he looked at Max, curled up on the couch beside him, he realized how different things were. There was no need for compromise with the dog. Max didn't care if James had a bad day, if he was in a good mood, or if he had made mistakes. Max loved him unconditionally, offering a loyalty that James hadn't experienced from another human being in years. For the first time in a long while, James felt at ease. He realized that perhaps the answer wasn't in finding love again, but in embracing the peace he had finally found on his own. James had reached a point in his life where he began to question everything he once believed. He had spent so many years chasing something that, in the end, only seemed to bring him heartache. The idea of love, the idea of connection, had all been wrapped in dreams and hope, but now, looking back, it felt like he had been searching for a mirage. Each relationship seemed to promise happiness, but what he found instead were compromises, unmet expectations, and, worst of all, a gradual loss of his own self-worth. The emotional weight was too much to carry anymore. He had tried, time and again, to make it work, But the truth was becoming clearer every day. Love, at least in the way he had known it, had become a series of sacrifices. Now, sitting in the comfort of his own home, with Max quietly by his side, James felt something he hadn't in years: peace. The simplicity of this quiet companionship was exactly what he had been missing. No more worrying about expectations or trying to meet the ever-changing demands of another person. Max gave him loyalty without question, companionship without strings attached. It was the kind of connection James had been searching for all along, but he had never realized it until now. The bond he shared with his dog was simple, genuine, and most importantly, it allowed him to breathe again. For James, the decision to remain single was not about avoiding love. It was about protecting his peace and embracing the calm he had long been denied. James had always believed that love was supposed to bring joy, but over the years, he had learned that it could also bring deep emotional costs. He had poured his heart into relationships, giving everything he had, only to feel like he was constantly on the losing end. What was once exciting and full of potential became a cycle of unmet expectations, frustration, and loneliness in the end. He had been through the heartbreaks, the compromises, and the emotional exhaustion, and now, he couldn't help but wonder if the pursuit of love was worth it anymore. After all the ups and downs, he was left with a bitter truth. Love, as he had experienced it, had become more about surviving than thriving. It had drained him, making him question his own worth. But now, with Max by his side, the situation felt different. The bond they shared was uncomplicated, pure, and honest. There were no expectations, no emotional demands, no fear of betrayal. Max simply gave James something that he hadn't felt in a long time: peace. The simplicity of their relationship reminded James of something he had forgotten: the importance of feeling safe, valued, and free from emotional turmoil. For the first time in years, James felt like he was in control of his own life again. He realized that he didn't need love to define him or give his life meaning. The calm and stability he had now was enough, and it was more than he had ever hoped for. James had spent most of his life chasing something that always seemed to slip through his fingers. The idea of love had once been his guiding star, something that he believed would bring him fulfillment and happiness. But after years of failed relationships and the emotional toll of giving more than he ever received, that belief had slowly started to fade. Now, with every passing day, he felt more at peace with his decision to remain alone. There was no drama, no emotional turbulence, just quiet moments of clarity that filled his life with meaning. Max, his loyal dog, had become his companion in these moments of peace. Unlike the people he had loved and lost, Max's love was unconditional. Max didn't expect anything from him other than companionship. There were no demands, no hidden agendas, just a bond built on trust. It was simple, yet it was everything James needed. He had learned to appreciate the calm, the quiet that came with being alone but never lonely. It was a freedom he hadn't realized he craved until he experienced it. The more he thought about it, the more he understood that he didn't need love to complete him. He didn't need someone else to validate his worth or make him feel whole. What he needed was peace, and that peace came from within. In the silence of his own company, with Max by his side, James finally felt that he had found what he had been searching for all along. James had begun to realize that the idea of love was no longer something he was chasing. It wasn't that he didn't believe in love anymore, but he had learned something far more valuable in his years of experience. Love couldn't fix the inner turmoil he had felt for so long. He had tried to find solace in relationships, thinking that another person could fill the emptiness. But every time, he ended up feeling drained, as if love had become an expectation, a set of rules, and not the pure connection he once imagined. Now, he was at peace with the silence of his own company. His bond with Max had become his quiet sanctuary. No longer did he feel the pressure to perform emotionally or to carry the weight of another person's needs. There was no more wondering if he was doing enough or if he was still good enough. He didn't have to ask for validation, nor did he have to give it. With Max, everything felt effortless. They were in sync, two souls simply enjoying each other's presence. This was the kind of relationship James had always wanted, but he had never known how to find it until now. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. The simplicity of it felt like a breath of fresh air after so many years of emotional exhaustion. James no longer saw loneliness as something to avoid, but as something that brought him the peace he had long sought. He realized that he had all he needed within himself: peace, security, and, most importantly, the freedom to live on his own terms. As James sat quietly in his living room, watching Max curl up beside him, he couldn't help but reflect on the freedom he had gained. It wasn't just the absence of a partner. It was the absence of the constant emotional labor that relationships had once demanded of him. There was no longer the pressure to constantly adjust, to meet someone else's needs, or to compromise his own happiness. For the first time in his life, James realized that being single wasn't a punishment or a failure. It was the key to his newfound peace. He had spent so many years thinking that love was the ultimate goal, the thing that would complete him. But now, he understood that love could never fill a void that only inner peace could. There was no longer the feeling of always giving, without ever truly receiving. The simple moments he shared with Max, the quiet walks in the park, the calm evenings at home, were enough. He no longer felt the need to prove anything to anyone, not to a partner, not to society, not even to himself. James had found something more valuable than love: self-acceptance. The kind of self-acceptance that came from years of learning, growing, and ultimately, stepping back. He didn't need anyone else to validate his worth or his choices. What he had now was something far more meaningful: a life on his own terms, full of peace, and free from the chaos of unfulfilled expectations. He had become his own source of happiness, and that, to him, was enough. James had come to realize that the most important relationship in his life was the one he had with himself. It was a relationship that had taken years to cultivate, one that had been tested and broken through many past trials, but now, it stood stronger than ever. He no longer feared being alone, because he understood that solitude didn't equate to loneliness, it equated to freedom. The freedom to live without compromise, the freedom to wake up every day without the pressure of meeting someone else's needs, and the freedom to be at peace in his own space. It had been a long journey, but in that quiet room, with Max by his side, James finally understood that his worth was not dependent on being in a relationship, nor on the approval of others. He didn't need to follow the path that society laid out for him, to find love, to marry, to settle down, because he had already found what he was looking for. It wasn't in another person. It was in himself. The peace he had discovered in the absence of romantic love had given him something more fulfilling than he had ever known before. It was a lesson he wished he had learned earlier in life, but the timing was perfect. Now, he could live the rest of his days on his own terms, free from the emotional demands and struggles of trying to make someone else happy. The peace James had long sought had finally found him, and he realized it was the most valuable thing he could have ever hoped for.